Hey, everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to talking with Jason Epstein. Jason, thanks for being on the show. Jason's a principal at CTC Talent Partners. They basically help companies become culture-driven and people-focused, helping companies build an effective and repeatable hiring process. Jason, I'm looking forward to talking with you because, a lot of questions I ask as a business coach companies is, what does a bad hire cost you? What does a bad recruiting process cost you? What is keeping the wrong person in the wrong seat cost you? What is keeping a toxic person in the organization cost you? I mean, I could go on and on, but those are some key questions that I'm always asking companies when I walk into their walls. And so, as somebody who runs a company to help people make smarter hiring decisions, right? What's the first thing that people really need to be looking at when it comes to their current roster? Let's start there. So you have your current roster of people. What's the first thing you need to be looking at when it comes to understanding who, what, and why you need to hire?
Yeah, John, great question, and pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think the first place to start is just an examination across the organization to determine right people, right seats, right? So before you begin to add layers or add folks to the organization, you really want to get a granular understanding of what is required out of each position, right? What are those day-to-day or week-over-week responsibilities and KPIs? More importantly, what are those skills, behaviors, and competencies required out of that role? Because if you have misalignment with the current folks sitting in those seats, if you're going to scale, you're just building on an already shaky foundation.
Yeah.
So it's always the first place we start. When we're looking to bring somebody aboard for a new role, we're going to talk with the rest of the folks on that team, work with leadership to put together that ideal candidate profile.
Yeah.
And we use that. We have folks on the existing team also take those tests so that we know where someone's strong, where someone's weak. So if you go to think about who you're bringing on, your existing team, right? What you have, what you're already working with factors into the person that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's overlooked, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's talk about you mentioned being misaligned. I'm a big fan of believing that when you're in alignment, you can take action, right? When companies are in alignment with the right people in the right seats, you can take action. When you're in an adjustment period, it's really difficult to take action. And so a lot of companies kind of stay in that adjustment period, right? Trying to kind of do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, which is insanity, versus raising the level of consciousness that they need to be looking at something and saying, okay, these are the moves we need to do to get back into alignment. So if you're misaligned, my first question is, how do you know you're misaligned? And two, how do you get back into alignment?
Sure. I would say symptoms of being misaligned. Well, first, you're not hitting your goals, right? So your revenue numbers are down. Other KPIs from individuals or company-wide are not being met. Also, we see it in culture. If morale is low, employees are disengaged. We see all of that, right? Totally across the board. And the challenge for most companies is, where do we start, right? How do we know what the first step in this process is? And that's where companies kind of, from a sense of frustration, they might just keep trying the same thing over and over, maybe make a little variation here or there, but not really identifying those systemic issues that are sort of agent zero of the other symptoms that are plaguing their company.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So once you get into alignment and you realize you need some people, and then you've done it a certain way, you've hired a certain way. Typically, a lot of companies will say, who's not busy? Okay, you look at resumes and let's look at a couple, and then people settle. I think a lot of times they settle because they're hiring reactively versus proactively, and most people don't have a formula or a system on how to recruit. At least I find. And so I'm a big fan of formulas and systems and continuums and processes and all that. So what does Talent Partners recommend to clients when it comes to creating a recruiting system?
Sure. And there's a lot of layers, John. So I'll try to address this kind of sequentially. So the first question, we ask companies ask themselves is, what do we have to offer? What is this opportunity, and what does this organization have to attract somebody that's in the marketplace right now? So many times, companies fall short of really of selling their true story. A lot of times it's very top line. We're a company, we've been in business for 60 years. We've experienced some growth. As we're looking to scale, we're looking to add top talent. So that attraction piece is the first thing that we examine. And in order to do that, you really have to spend a lot of time. We usually spend 3, 4, 5 hours with a leadership team so that you get to know their organization holistically, not necessarily just what they're looking for out of this role, but what is the big picture vision? What is the mission and values of that company? Also getting to know the organization and their leadership team, building those relationships so that when you're out there speaking to candidates in the marketplace representing a company, it feels like you're an extension of that organization and not a transactional vendor that's been hired to go fill a role.
Yeah.
And the last piece is, again, spending that time to absorb their company culture and core values. So not only can you, share that information, share stories with folks you're talking to in the market, it also allows you to screen and filter for core values and cultural alignment when you're interviewing a candidate, something that's, again, often overlooked in the interview process.
Yeah. Talk to me about, it's interesting, the interview process. I'm a big fan of hire slow, fire fast, right? But define what that means to you, right? How slow and how fast?
Yeah, great question, John. So there's not necessarily a bright line rule with this question here, but what we try to do is create a process where both parties have enough time to build a relationship, both professionally and personally, get to know each other, have comfort with this role and opportunity, but not too much time where you have a process that people feel disconnected or disengaged. So in order to do this, we spend a lot more time with the candidates on the front end. My partner, Adam, will generally screen a candidate for about an hour. Adam and I will then hop on a Zoom call. We'll both provide an extra filter. And usually the last 30 minutes of that call, we'll record it. We'll send it to hiring managers so they get visibility or early visibility before they bring somebody in for an interview. Yeah. And what this allows them to do, instead of just sending a resume or some top line information on a candidate, they get to see someone's demeanor, their professionalism. And when they actually go to interview, those interview rooms are a lot warmer. Now, even though the hiring managers haven't had a chance personally to interact, they at least have an idea of how this person sounds, what they look like. It makes the process a lot warmer. So, that's probably several more hours than most other recruiters will spend on the front end before presenting a candidate. We also sit in on every interview with our clients. We do a lot of one-on-one coaching with hiring managers to make them stronger interviewers in the room. We craft personalized question sets around the behaviors, competencies, and skills that we've identified when benchmarking the role. So we provide them an interview scorecard that rates each of those, each of those things. And so we try to take a lot of the guesswork out of those interviews and out of those interview debrief rooms. So again, so that companies can make more data-driven decisions.
But tell me this: there's data, then there's intuition, right? I can look at a form, I can look at a resume that looks perfect, I can look at data that looks perfect, but my gut is saying this person's the wrong person. And I think a lot of times people don't pay enough attention to their gut and their intuition. So so kind of balance the two for me, right? Because I think it's the art and the science of recruiting.
It's a great question, and one we get a lot. And it always takes me back. My first love before I got into business was actually playing. I still play a little bit, playing high stakes poker. I've been playing for about 20 years, and the combination of science and intuition. I've been living.
What is define high stake?
Well, now it's a little bit different. You're playing a no limit game of 2-5 are the blinds, and average cash in's probably $500 to $1,500.
Okay.
So, so we rely on the tools to give us a baseline of information, right? So that gives us an indicator of what someone's natural wiring is and what their professional DNA, what they've developed. So sometimes that'll align with how we experience them and what the intuition tells us in a room. What it does is it gives us information that we can use to ask additional questions, to probe deeper into those areas, to confirm whether or not our intuition's telling us what we see on a profile or not. And there's definitely times where some of those assessment tools we use, sometimes people are taking them when they're not at their best. They might misunderstand a certain piece of the test. So it does take some deeper questioning and a reliance a bit on intuition to sort of get to the truth. But it's definitely a combination of both those things.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk about, when it comes to recruiting, I think some of the things that that is interesting right now. We're in a world where, 40, 50 years ago, people had a job, they stayed there for their whole lives. Today, in many cases, there are, and it's not just millennials, but people will stay at a job for 3 to 4 years. That's kind of typical. On top of that, 50% of the people you hire may not stay long term or even make it. And so when you have people who are in these 3-4 year opportunities coming into a company, and they're not coming in for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, how do you hire that? And then what kind of foundation do you set with them to know that they only are with you for X amount of time?
Great question, John. So when you're filtering somebody or interviewing somebody that's not as stable, that 3-4 year kind of individual, right? You really want to understand how the role was set up initially, what those expectations were, how the company's set up, how their team's set up, and then sort of start stripping away those layers, right? And find out what worked and what didn't work. Most of the time, we find that the role wasn't set up properly. This person, in many instances, was set up to fail. A lot of times they just end up being de-energized from a role, even though their performance isn't awful. Sometimes they're performing very strongly, but they just can't, getting out of bed and going to work every morning is a chore for them.
Yeah.
We see a lot of that. And in terms of setting expectations for, this hire coming in future roles, again, it's just making sure that you've gone through all your progressions to make sure, expectations are set up amongst all team members. We have a very clear onboarding program, what success looks like over the first 90 days, the first 6 months, and the first year. And everybody on the team, has that level of accountability to make sure what we're set out to do and we actually do. A lot of times when someone's brought into a new company, it doesn't have a lot of structure, but when they're in that role, they become a casualty of the company that's organized.
Yeah, sorry, that was my son.
No problem.
Right, it's working from home, right? That's
you get great Zoom moments out of it, though. It's almost like your enthusiasm episode.
I know, 100%. Recruiting is so challenging, and I find that sometimes people settle, and I'm a big fan of never settling. And so, where does a company find the time to actually create the system, do what they need to do, interview all the people to hire great? I mean, I'm a big believer that if you want to grow and scale your organization, especially in today's world, where we're working remotely, we're going to continue this in some format. I think even post-COVID, you've got to have great people. You've got to have great managers. I find myself doing so much training with managers and salespeople and leaders and managers on how to even manage them. So, how do you find the time, and where do people find the time or the resources to make sure that they recruit right?
Yeah, awesome question, John. And we talk about this pretty much on a daily basis with company leadership. Everybody's got a lot of priorities. Everything's on fire. So it's really about prioritizing, the 5 or 6 things that are top of mind for your business today, stack ranking those, and really figuring out where does talent fall in line. Yeah. Many times where companies land is they realize talent's the straw that stirs the drink. If you want to grow and scale your company, you want to be successful moving forward and hitting those revenue and production goals, you need people to do it. Yeah. So if you don't have time to do it, you need to either make it or focus on something else. Because what we find is when people try to dip their toe in the water and just put a little bit of time into fixing talent, but not really addressing those systemic issues, we always advise, let's just press pause until you have the time and resource commitment to be able to solve this. Otherwise, you can go sideways or backwards, trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem that requires surgery.
Yeah, well said. Who's your ideal client, Jason?
I'd say first and foremost is an alignment of core values. And we work mostly in Metro Detroit. Most of our business is referral based. Headcount of companies we work with generally under 150. Worked in probably 12 or 13 different markets in the last couple of years. But again, it's a company that has an awareness. They don't necessarily need to know what the problem is, but know that there's an issue and a challenge, and they want to do something about it and be intentional.
Yeah.
Right? If we're brought in for the wrong reasons, if you're there to appease a board or because people are just unhappy and the owner wants to write a check and disengage to fix a problem, it generally doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, good. You ready for a quick speed round?
Yeah.
All right. Favorite business book and why?
The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones that I read. One of the first business books that I read, and I always revert back to it. Just so much truth and the applications, from working for other people, having my own business, working with leadership teams, just very relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Best piece of wisdom you ever received?
Don't force things.
Yeah.
If it's not there, it's not going to work. So, part as friends, don't drive an agenda, seek the truth.
Yeah. I love that. That is sound advice. And one piece of advice you would give somebody who just graduated college, who's in the world to find maybe their first real job.
Take an assessment test. Have an idea. Try to understand the intersection of your passion, your skill set, and your behaviors.
Yeah.
That's funny. I started as an attorney and benchmarking roles for companies. I'm the exact opposite profile of what you'd want an associate attorney.
Yeah.
If I had taken this test 20 years ago, my life might be a little bit different.
Yeah, I love that. All right, tell people again who your ideal client is and how they can get a hold of you.
Sure. Yeah, our ideal client is small and medium-sized businesses here in Metro Detroit or anywhere else in Michigan that are experiencing challenges around talent, hiring, or retention, and can get a hold of me going to our website, ctcsolutions.net. Reach me by email, jepstein@ctcsolutions.net. Always happy to have a conversation. Again, we're there to inform, share information, and answer questions, which is frankly one of the things I love most about what I do.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you joining us today, Jason, and thanks for sharing everything that you're sharing. Recruiting, I think, is so important. Having a talent strategy on what you do and how you do it is absolutely critical for any company to grow and scale. Wish you all the best to the Think community. Thanks so much for tuning in. And Jason, thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Great to be here. Thanks.